A very good morning to all. Continuing our topic from yesterday's topics and discussions, that Balkan region became a source of tension in Europe in the 19th century. Balkan region, it is a peninsular region of Europe, and in the medieval period it was inhabited by the Muslim rulers, popularly known as the Ottoman Empire, or you write down Ottoman Empire, it is Ottoman Empire, right? Muslim rulers who were very strong in the medieval period, you can imagine their power, that even they had inhabited the modern Serbia, Romania, Bulgaria, Greece, Montenegro, Herzegovina, Bosnia, Croatia, Slovenia, etc. All comprising the peninsular region of Europe, and they were under the Ottoman Empire, Muslim rulers. 19th century, however, was a period of rise of nationalism, about which we are studying in the whole chapter. The people of the Balkan regions, they were united together to fight for their independence. Do you remember in my previous lectures, I think third or fourth lecture, the Greek War of Independence? Greece was also a part of the Ottomans. It was also a part of the Muslim Empire in the medieval period. But after there was July Revolution in France, there were developments in Greece, and the European countries, they met in Constantinople, and in 1832 they granted independence to the Greece because they had sympathy with the Greek culture. And in the previous lecture I told you that previously it was ideal nationalism, that means helping the other countries also to become nation states. And this is in the last quarter of the 19th century, this ideal nationalism was converted into a narrow creed with limited ends. It became a narrow creed, extreme nationalism, my country good or bad, the theory of Chauvinism, my country good or bad. So by now European countries were not those countries who supported Greek War of Independence in 1830s. Now they were imperial, and they had their own interest in different areas because industrial revolution had taken place, and they wanted more land, more territories, more raw material, meant more raw materials, more markets, more people to work in the industries and factories and work as white collars. So in the Balkan states, nationalism grew. They were confident that like Greek War of Independence was supported by the European countries, we will be supported by the European countries too. So the question arises, what made these Slavs to come together? So there were two factors. This is your short answer of 3 marks. Two things brought nationalism in the Balkans. The first factor was that they were driven by the spirit of romanticism, about which again I have told you in my previous lectures. Romanticism, a cultural movement that began in Europe to bring together even those people, even that population which was mostly illiterate, and they could not go through the documents, the pamphlets that were issued by the revolutionaries time to time, because revolutionaries were educated middle class, elite mostly. So at the end of the 19th century, there was growth of nationalism in the Balkans due to romanticism, means they came to know about their culture. They began to base their demand for independence by claiming it that once we had been independent and subsequently we are subjugated by the Ottoman Empire, by the Muslim rulers. They also claimed their identity, that we were identifiable. We had our own culture, we had our own language, we had our own traditions. And subsequently, because we were subjugated by the Muslims, so we had to go through that culture and those traditions. So romanticism played a very important role in uniting the people of the Balkans. The cultural movement. They came to know about their culture, they came to know about their identity, that we can also demand. We also want our long lost independence, hoping that they will be supported by the European countries. And then this second factor was disintegration of the Ottoman Empire. Modern period was a period of Christians, In the modern period, Christians were coming up, and yesterday I told you that medieval period was the period of Muslims. Everywhere Muslim empire, everywhere Muslim, even in India, Muslims were ruling in the medieval period. Correct? So it was period of disintegration, disintegration of the Ottomans, disintegration of the Muslims. So these two factors brought them together, brought Slavs together, the people of the Balkan Peninsula region, and one by one they began to assert their long lost independence. Correct? The Muslim rulers, however, they began to introduce certain reforms so as to make them be under their control, but no effect. I told you that they were driven by these two factors. So Ottoman rulers, they began to introduce certain things, began to introduce certain concessions and reforms to them, but nothing came out. And one by one, these subjects, the people, they freed themselves from the Ottoman Empire one by one, declaring their independence, hoping that they will be European countries, Russia, Britain, France, Austria-Hungary. Maybe they will support their independence, and like Greeks got independence, we will also assert independence. So one by one they were freed. And students, there were quarrels and rivalries between them on the issue of territories. Each Balkan state wanted to gain more power by capturing the territories of the others. However, the question must be going in your mind, what European countries were doing at this time, the big powers, Russia, Britain, France, they were watching the scene. This was a scene of big power rivalry. I told you this was a period of extreme nationalism. Instead of supporting their independence, big European powers, Russia, Germany, England, Austria-Hungary, they had their own interests in Balkans. And in fact, they considered, let them fight, let them become weak, and in future we will capture them, we will extend our territory. More land, more territory, more markets, more labor to work. This was the tendency at that time. Correct? So what we are studying, Balkan region became a source of tension in Europe in the 19th century. We are studying this topic, source of tension, wars, battles, and anti-Austrian propaganda in Serbia, one of the part of Balkan. Serbia, anti-Austrian propaganda. In the previous time, some of the Slavs, they left Serbia and they went to Austria and they were settled over there. And without any reason, out of irritation, there was anti-Austrian propaganda in Serbia, that the Slavs who had left earlier come back to Serbia. And it was a meaningless propaganda. When the Austrian prince and his wife, Archduke Francis Ferdinand and his wife, when they were sent to Serbia to watch the anti-Austrian propaganda and tell them that this is a useless propaganda and see what is going on over there. When the Austrian prince, Archduke Francis Ferdinand and his wife went to Serbia to watch the anti-Austrian propaganda and to take some solution to the problem, they both were murdered while they were coming out of a museum by a 19-year-old Serbian student, Gavrilo Princip. Note it down. Gavrilo Princip, 19-year-old student, shot them dead. You can see the rivalry, you can see how enmity was there between the countries. Murder of the Austrian prince led to the developments. Austrian government sent an ultimatum to Serbia that either punish or hand over the suspected murderers. They knew that Gavrilo Princip had murdered the prince and his wife. For a month there was no reply from Serbia. Why? Because Serbia at the back had Britain, France, USSR, Russia, and they were not afraid of war. And behind Austria came Germany, Italy. Correct? Behind Serbia there was Russia, there was France, there was Britain. Russia, which became USSR later. They were there, so nobody was afraid of war. And here, while Austria was supported by, obviously Austria-Hungary were combined after First World War, they were freed together, they were made two independent countries, Austria-Hungary, Italy, Germany. and murder of the prince, no reply from Serbia, led to the World War. And so Balkan issue became a source of tension in Europe in the 19th century. Very simple answer, because the developments in Balkans led to a series of wars, and finally the disaster in the world, that is First World War, which was very drastic, very costly industrial war. So that is why we can say, and historians say, that Balkan region became a source of tension in Europe in the 19th century. So this is how it goes. It is a 5 marks topic. And in between there are short answers. What factors brought nationalism in the Balkans? You can write down by just classifying these 2 factors and telling that how Romanticism and disintegration of the Ottoman Empire. Disintegration of the Ottoman Empire gave them idea, gave the Slavs idea that strike the iron when it is hot. Now these Muslim rulers are disintegrating, they are declining. This is the right time to ask for independence. So this tendency led to a series of wars and finally the First World War. I hope this topic is clear to you. Many students, they find it very difficult. They are afraid of this topic, Balkan issue, but do it in points, as I told you, one by one. First of all, what were Balkans, what were Balkan states, who were Ottoman Empire, who were Muslim, they were very strong in the medieval period. Then write down that because it was a period of extreme nationalism, so big European powers, they were watching the scene, they were not interfering in their matters. Actually, they had their own interest in Balkans. Then write down that 2 things brought nationalism in the Balkans, and then one by one they freed themselves from the Muslim rulers and they got their independence. Nobody supported them. And finally, it led to a series of wars between them, and finally the First World War. Correct? So like this you classify your answer. The last topic of this chapter will be anti-imperial struggles. 3 marks topic. The last topic of this chapter, anti-imperial struggles. Or you can call it a very easy term of anti-imperial struggles. Correct? By now you are aware that most of Asia and Africa was subjugated by the European countries or Western powers. Most of the parts of Asia and Africa, they were subjugated, they were under the colonial empires. Correct? And 19th century was the period when nationalism was developing in these countries, in different parts of Asia and Africa. Everywhere their leaders were different. Everywhere the mode of struggles were different. In India there were so many modes of struggles. First of all there was Congress, then there were moderates, there were extremists, there was rise of Gandhi, then there was rise of revolutionaries who really played a very important role in the freedom struggle of India. And moreover, Britishers were very afraid of revolutionaries. And then there were socialist groups, etc. So many groups were there, so many different sections, they fought for independence. Similarly, it was going on in different colonies, in Africa, in different parts of Africa. Nelson Mandela was leading the people, and in other parts like Indochina, that is Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam, it is combinedly called Indochina. So everywhere national movements were going on. So they were called anti-imperial struggles. And like I told you about ideal nationalism up to the last quarter of the 19th century and extreme nationalism in the last quarter of the 19th century, extreme nationalism was nowhere replicated in Asia and Africa, remember. In Asia and Africa, it was an ideal nationalism throughout. Means when one country was fighting against the colonial empire, they were also supporting the other countries to attain their independence. For example, during the national movement of India, 2 organizations were formed, India League in England, and that fought for India's independence, that was proposing independence to India, and League Against Imperialism was formed in India to fight imperialism everywhere. That each and every country should be freed from the colonial empire. So these were anti-imperial struggles, they were carried on, different leaders, different modes of struggles. Everywhere people fought for their independence and also supported the others. And this attempt, these efforts by the different people of the colonies and different sections of the societies, it brought them independence And these anti-imperial struggles were truly ideally nationalist. Ideally nationalist. They were totally nationalist. They were fighting for their own independence. They were also supporting the independence of the others. So anti-imperial struggles went on. These are rightly called the independence struggles in Asia, Africa, Latin America and other colonies of the different European and Western countries. And finally, after the Second World War, that is after 1945, gradually the countries began to be independent. For example, India became independent in 1947, and then there was series of independence procedures, and gradually most of the countries became independent. So it was known as anti-imperial struggle, struggles against imperialism by different countries. So that is all for today. This was the end of your chapter, and we will meet in the next lecture. Thank you very much.